Welcome to A Canadian Investing in the U.S., a podcast and YouTube channel focused on Canadians buying real estate with host Glenn Sutherland.
Welcome to another episode of A Canadian Investing in the U.S. This week, my guest is Troy Anderson. Troy, if you want to give everyone kind of an intro to yourself, and then we'll get into this.
Sure. We've been rebuilding, remodeling, and just started this year building houseboats. They're down in Lake Powell, so northern Arizona, and working with real estate investors on that end of things as well, into the point of setting them up for Airbnbs, VRBOs, different things like that, kind of taking Airbnb to the next level, and getting it to do pulling it out of the hat, I guess, to where it's different than what everybody else has out there. We're working on a boat right now for Key West, so there's some things going on there that's going to happen. And all of that has also transpired and turned into building container homes and tiny homes as well. And so we just opened that up this year, actually the end of last year, here in northern Utah. So with both ends of that, we're moving right along.
It's awesome. This is one of those topics that's so exciting to me. So for the houseboats, let's first start with that, and then we'll get into the tiny and container homes. But houseboats as an Airbnb, are you starting from scratch with these boats? Are you taking a boat and retrofitting it, or what does that kind of look like?
Depends on budgets. The boat that we're building for Key West, we have a $500,000 budget on that boat. That one's going to be from ground up. Which means we go through, I've got an engineering team that does all my structural engineering. We do aluminum framing or steel framing. And I also have an architect who does all my 3D drawings. I do all my designing with my clients myself, and then pass it on to our team to where we have a set of plans, the whole 9 yards, to where we can go through with surveyors, inspections and different things like that, to where everything's crossed and dotted as we go through. Most of the boats that we're building are not the big, expensive, crazy boats. They're going to be 50 foot and smaller. We're wanting to try to cater to a demographic that's not necessarily being hit right now, and that would be in that capacity of 50 foot and smaller. There's on Lake Powell, being the biggest lake on the West Coast, pretty much, and the Colorado River. There's lots of houseboats in Kentucky. There's Tennessee on the East Coast. There's tons of bigger houseboats out there as well. But we've kind of found a niche to where that 40 to 65-year-old niche, where kids are gone. They don't need an 80-foot boat. A little 50-foot by 14, 16 wide seems to work really well, to where a couple could handle it very easily, especially where we have summertime here with storms and stuff like that. We didn't want something so big that they had to feel that the clients were nervous about being in their boat, or hesitant of taking it out, or feeling like they need 10 people to man this boat if they do get into a storm. So that's kind of the niche that we've found, and a lot of it is budget. We work around people's budget, and that's kind of a different thing, where most of the big industrial companies that are building boats and stuff like that, they have set prices. When we start our conversation out with clients, one of my first questions is, where's the budget going to land? I don't want to design a $500,000 boat if your budget's 300. So right off the get-go, it's not a take it or leave it. It's, let's work around your budget. We can do anything from 100,000 retrofit all the way up to a rebuild that's 250,000 to a brand new boat that could be $500,000. We do a lot of newer products inside. We can do a lot of our own mechanical work. So like motors and stuff like that, we can rebuild them in our shop on site, which is at Lake Powell as well in Page, Arizona. And just give a whole array to where we don't want to leave people out of the box. For example, we just want to be able to work with them and put something together to where they can enjoy it. And we're in this all day long, in the summertime especially. So it's not like we're a boat manufacturer that doesn't have the experience on the water. During the summer, we're on the water. And so we know what works. We know what doesn't work. We know how to fix things on the spot if we had to. and most of our boats that we've been working on have stayed West Coast. So we've got some boats going down to the Phoenix area. We've got boats going into the Colorado area, northern Utah area as well, and then the Tahoe and California side as well. So we've kind of stayed more that West Coast side of things at this point, and expanding. We're opening up a transport company right now to where we will have the capacity to transport houseboats, and I've already got a connection on the East Coast as well. So I can transport from Tennessee, Kentucky, anywhere over there, over to the West Coast or vice versa.
This is cool. Before we had this talk, just from your conversation, I'm picturing something different. But when I started, I was picturing a box, like, those houseboats that are just basically, you have to tugboat them in and they don't actually move. They're basically a barge. But now it sounds like you're talking about like a 50-foot, like, actual like powerboat or like, a cruising boat, right? Do you do both kinds, or is it all like they look like real boats?
We custom build. So on a design side of things, for example, we've got a couple different models. So kind of on the Northwest side, being Seattle and Portland side, is a very contemporary boat, clean lined into the grays and the blacks and that kind of more executive type feel of boat. We're working with people down in Lake Travis in Texas right now to where we're building more. We're calling that boat the Maverick.
Okay.
And so we're taking the areas of the nation and putting things together to where we have different themes, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Lake Havasu is a big party scene, so we're building a party barge for that one. And that'll have a full bar on it and stuff like that. As we get into New England states, I would imagine we're going to get a little bit more yacht feeling, a lot of wood versus what we would do in Seattle. The Key West boat, which is down in Florida, that is a very Caribbean feeling boat. We've actually designed that one with a 4x4 glass floor in it. That glass is removable, so kids can dive in underneath the boat from the inside of the boat and then come back up into the cabin itself and not have an issue with water or anything like that. We're using very different products in there and how we're setting that up to where it's the Caribbean area. It's going to be warm most of the time of the year, and it works out really well. Now, the one thing that's kind of interesting is we've got, being the Airbnb, VRBO side of things and real estate investors, liability is a big factor and insurance. And so, for example, the Key West boat, that one is going out without motors. So essentially it's going to be a floating house or a floating barge. And that's where we've come up with the company that we have been in, or that we designed 4 years ago, is called Last Chance Houseboats, being that we were just remodeling and rebuilding boats. Now this last year we've come in and we are exclusive yacht houses. And this is now the new boat section of things, to where we're building brand new boats from ground up, designing them however they want. We've got a pontoon manufacturer out of Indiana that supplies for the whole nation, to where we can build any size of pontoon that we need to satisfy the weights and balances of the boat. Being that we're only 10 minutes or so from Lake Powell, where we build these, we end up dropping the boats in the water a couple times during the production side of things, to where we can set them in. We can see if they're listing to one side or the other, if they're heavy in the aft of the boat or the bow of the boat, and we can make those adjustments as we're going, and also test the boat before they even go out or we ship them out anywhere. We'll take them out for a full day and test them, run the generators, run the systems, air conditioning units. There's all kinds of things that we need to do and take care of on that end.
Awesome. This might not be your side of the business, but for like Airbnbs, if you're going to run these as an Airbnb, like, do marinas have an issue with this? Having, people coming in and out? Hello, everybody. Thanks for listening to the podcast. I just wanted to let you know that I've created a new coaching program. I believe the new coaching program has way more value than any of the programs that have even existed in the past. What we've done is pre-recorded all the lessons so that you can work through it at your own pace, which is pretty cool. And then we're going to meet up on a regular basis to answer the questions, do deal analysis, and actually spend our time together working on things instead of spending our time learning things. I think this will make a seamless transition to buying in the United States and will help you solve a lot of your problems. What I'm doing right now is offering a discount code on the course. I want to have it so we have a nice full group in order to do the deal analysis and to work through our problems together. If this is of interest to you, go to glensutherland.com/coaching. When you get to the website, click on the course and type in the discount code April 2023. This will get you $500 off for the month of April. I hope to help you guys invest in the United States, and I hope we provide as much value as possible. Back to the podcast.
Yes and no. We've talked, so on the East Coast, going up towards Boston area where there's a lot of inlets and a lot of marinas and stuff, we've had probably about 25%. We're at the point of, yeah, that's not a problem. We don't have an issue with it. You're going to get more kickback, 60 to 75% of they just don't want the riffraff in the marinas. They want the family side of things. You start renting these things out, and all of a sudden you've got the punk kids that are trashing the place, or the music's too loud in the evening, or whatever it should be. That's where a lot of it is going into that factor. So we have our client, it's a whole basis of, it's no different than the tiny homes and container homes. You've got to get permission from the city. You've got to go through HOA stuff. Same thing with the marinas. You've got to go down, talk to the marina owners or managers, see if they're cool with it. If they have, the biggest thing we found, slips are another story of trying to find availability. East Coast is much easier than a lot of the lakes here in Texas, Lake Havasu and Lake Powell. But being that we have a smaller boat and we can we can make them 12 foot, 13 foot, 14, 15 foot wide. We can make them however wide people need them to be, to where if they find a slip and say, this is the size of the slip, okay, we can manufacture a boat to that, versus just having, sorry, we only do 14, 16, 18 foot beams. So there's a lot of, like I said, we can build everything to where we're kind of just customizing around exactly what somebody wants, just like a custom home.
Yeah.
You can build whatever you want.
And like legality to this, like, do the tenants, like if you're an Airbnb tenant, do you get to drive these boats around? Like, are they expected to be sort of parked there?
We haven't had, the Key West is our first boat that we're going to be working with a real estate investor on.
Yeah.
And that one specifically won't have motors, because you get it, for one, you're on open water in the ocean versus a lake. And so your atmosphere, your changes, especially down in Florida and everything with hurricanes and everything else going on. We work with State Farm. And so I've got an agent that we can work with nationwide for insurance purposes on those ends, to where we've kind of set up a package to where we kind of just let people know, here you go, this is who you talk to for this. Here, we'll take care of the survey and that way you can present it to the insurance company. Because a lot of the real estate investors don't know a lot about boating. And when, the way that I see it is, a real estate investor can get online, buy a house in Colorado from Utah, don't need to see it. They know the revamps, the cost that it's going to cost there. They get a general contractor there, or they get a management company or whatever it is. They don't have to do much except for let it run itself, and they don't have to go see it. The boat side of it makes a lot of our real estate investors somewhat nervous, because it's work. But on the flip side, when you've got a neighborhood, for example, Lake Powell, that has over 300 Airbnbs and all these homes look the same, that they're renting out, there really isn't much difference there. It's 150 a night or something, to where if we had a boat on the water, which I already know the boat in Key West is going to rent from anywhere from $1,000 to $1,250, $1,500 a night. Oh. So yeah, there's more work involved on that end. And probably crossing and dotting your T's. Insurance isn't that big of a deal, but once again, you've got to somewhat interview the people that are getting on that boat, and know who's getting on it. But these boats won't have motors, so if they're partying and stuff, they can't take the boat out. You can lock it down with chains versus just locking it down with ropes with the cleats. There's ways of doing it to where they're not going anywhere, but it's just that you're giving that experience. Most people don't have an opportunity to be on a houseboat. Yachts are expensive. Nobody really rents them out at a decent rate to where they can go spend a weekend for $3,000 or $2,000 or whatever it is, have the boat to themselves. This particular boat was designed around just couples. And so there is a hide-a-bed inside for like a couch type thing for kids, but this client specifically wanted to reach out to upper end business clients and business couples to where they can come out for the weekend. They're not going to trash the boat. They're just coming out to relax and kind of have that experience of being on a boat, being on the upper deck, having coffee in the mornings.
Yeah.
And just get away. And being something that's brand new and not something that's beat up or used or anything like that. And we go through the design process with them. We can modernize it all we want. We can put everything and just downsize it, but everything that $1 million boat has, I can put inside a smaller boat. That's not a problem. Yeah. Full solar, we can do that as well. But if you're hooked up to the marina, you're going to be plugged in. You have water all the time. You've got power all the time. And then we have backup generators. So if the marina goes down or anything like that, they can turn on the generator, charge batteries if they needed to, or anything like that for emergency usage there. The only...
Okay, continue, sorry.
We don't have any kickback just yet with the marinas, being that they don't have motors. That's one of the things. Some of the marinas that we've talked to have required motors for the fact that if we had to get those boats out of there for an emergency, you need a motor to get it out. The Key West doesn't have an issue with that. They've got boats down there without motors now, and we don't have a problem putting motors on them. And that's not that big of a deal for us to do. It's just whatever the client wants us to do.
Okay. Sewer, how do you deal with this? Like, I'm guessing there's like gonna be a tank to collect stuff. Is there like a boat that comes to collect it off of your boat, or how do you get rid of that?
Most of the time on all the lakes, like the ones, we got two boats going. Well, we got one boat going to Navajo Lake in Colorado and another boat going to Lake Pleasant in Phoenix this year that are both rebuilds. Both of them are going out without motors. And these are private boats, not going to be rental boats. They're going to be personal boats that they're just going to get to the lake. They can put their ski boat up to it and have a nice place to stay for the weekend. And all of these boats have holding tanks, just like an RV.
Yep.
And there's a boat that comes around and it just comes and collects the sewer, and they just plug into it and dumps it in. The bigger marinas, some of them have hookups just like you would for an RV hookup, that you just hook right into it and it goes and does their thing. But the majority of them have a boat that just comes around when you're ready type thing and just dumps and fills and does whatever it needs to do.
Awesome. That's cool. And what's the cheapest boat? Because I know we were talking like, you were talking $500,000 boats. What's the cheapest boat that you would like even consider making? Just because I know that's gonna be a question people ask me.
Yeah. With today and this, and a lot of it depends on solar. A lot of it depends how you're going to use it. Your base boat, base price for a 40 to 50 footer, you're probably starting base price about 250 to 300,000.
Okay.
With motors.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's cool. This is really exciting stuff. And honestly, I think this is something I want to do myself. I think this would be pretty cool stuff. I'm going to change gears a little bit. Honestly, I didn't even know you were doing container homes, but I'm actually in the market of shopping for a container home. So what do you kind of offer in container homes? And is there like a shipping radius? Like I have a piece of land in Ohio that I want to put a shipping container home on. Is that too far? Does that even make sense with something that kind of distance?
To a point from what we found out the last 6 months, and this is the container home side of things and tiny homes has all come to around the full circle with our real estate investors, because instead of turning people away and saying, hey, we just do houseboats, sorry, we've been pushed the last 12 months or so from these real estate investors say, hey, I love your boats, but I don't want to be in the boat scene. I'm not comfortable with it, but can you build me a tiny home? Can you build me a container house? Can you do this in something that's more unique than the normal stuff, but not on the water? Right. And here's another aspect as well. We've got 2 or 3 investors in Southern Utah that want to take old boats that are not insurable anymore, which we can pick up for pennies at that point. But they want us to transport them onto their property in Southern Utah, where you have all the big national parks and everything, and they want the boats just set on the ground. Oh. And they're going to do that way. They can do they can hook up to sewer, hook up to power super easy. They can remodel it on their own schedule and however they want to do it, or they can have us do it and we transport it over to them. And then we just set them right on blocks or right on the dirt. And then, some of these boats have great upper decks already. Some of them need more cosmetic work, of course, than others, but they're not insurable anymore because they're on steel pontoons. And so if the insurance company isn't going to insure them, we've got people that are, it's no different than as you come up to what we call Highway 89 here in Utah, where you have Bryce Canyon, Zion Canyon National Park. You'll drive up and you'll see an Airbnb spot that has railroad cars. Yeah. And they're individual cars and they've been remodeled. And these are what people are trying to do now is, they feel like they need to better up the next guy. And nobody has houseboats on land to where they can still gain that, this is what it feels like to be in a houseboat. You can use the upper deck. You can use the slide to slide down into a sandbox or whatever for the kids. We've got some guys that are also putting them on lakes or ponds on their own property. And then they're running their own sewer and power. And they don't, it's their own property at that point. And if it's floating, that's even kind of cooler. With the sunsets that we have here in southern Utah, it's a pretty big thing. So so these real estate investors, with them asking us to do this about 6 months ago, we started looking more and more into tiny homes. My background in trade is natural stone, being a fabricator of natural stone in Vegas, and then also being a general contractor and doing remodels and additions here in northern Utah, with kitchens and baths and stuff like that. So we started working on the direction of container homes, to where we found out that here in Salt Lake, there's a business called the Container Girls, and they are a big social media. They have a big social media following, and they sell containers. And so we're working with them directly and buying containers. And containers are what we buy is one trip containers. So they're manufactured and they have one trip from China or wherever they've come from to the States, and then they're brought up here. So we don't have the smell issue in most of these. Most of them don't have dents in them, which I'm looking for, because we paint the exteriors. We can put cladding on the exteriors. We can put siding on the exteriors. We can do all kinds of stuff, especially if we're putting them in a neighborhood with HOAs and stuff. Southern Utah has been a big one. We're working with a developer to build 200 container homes, almost a 200 container home community down there right now. Okay. But one of the aspects is that it has to be very similar to the homes that are built around there. And so we'll use the inner sides of the containers, and we can put anything on the exterior. We can even stucco the exterior if we need to. We've already looked into that and have that system set up as well. But that's kind of how the containers evolved. And realistically, you're talking a 20-foot or a 40-foot container that's 8 foot wide and generally 8 feet taller. If you get the high ones, they're 9. And it's no different really than the size of houses that we're building for houseboats. And so that's and I don't have to worry about weight and balances now, like I do with houseboats, to where I can put weight in these. A normal container weighs about 8,000 pounds empty. But once again, it goes through our engineering for our structural side of things. Anytime that's one of the things that is somewhat unnerving for our end, because we're fighting it all the time, is that people are putting them out there. Oh, we can build it for 20,000. We can build it for 15,000, whatever it is. But they don't understand the factor. They think it's a shipping container. It's going to be structurally sound. It'll be fine. But once you cut a hole into that container, into the corrugated steel, you've got supporting issues. And so now it's more than just cut a hole, put a window in it. It's no different than building a home where you have to have headers in place and stuff like that. We've actually teamed up with a manufacturer here in Salt Lake City that will take and they do all their own CNC framing. And so they take a spool of aluminum it can be 18 gauge, 20 gauge, 22 gauge, all depending on structural side of things. And they'll take a spool of this, run it through their machine, and they can build and manufacture our home for a tiny home, or for the interior side of a container home. Or we're doing this as well for our houseboats now, instead of using wood framing. And it tells me the weight of how much it is. I can have it built in sections. They build the headers, they build everything out of steel, to where now I don't have dry rot issues on boats. I've saved weight issues, because the weight side of things, and plus the cost of 2x4s 2 years ago or so with COVID and everything, and the wood that comes down from Washington, a lot of it's wet. And so you have different weight issues that go on with wood that you really can't control. And then as wood dries, of course, it splits and does all kinds of funky things to where now we're controlling it with the steel framing. So that's something new this year. We just sold a $450,000 build boat that's going to go down to Phoenix. We're going to be starting that one here probably the next month or two. And that one is going to be all steel framing on that one. And they call it steel framing, but it's like a galvanized steel. So it's not the heavy steel that everybody's used to, like I-beams and stuff like that. This is almost just like aluminum framing that it just pretty much screws together. It's a whole system that we're doing. So we're doing, for example, right now, we're getting ready to sign a contract for a project out in Sonoma, California. That is, there's going to be, well, this one contract will be 10 tiny homes. They've given us the dimensions. We're having trailers custom built. They want them on trailers, and we're using steel framing. So I've got the trailer manufacturer, my steel manufacturer, my structural engineer together for setting up the plans, and we're putting it all together to make that work. And then if everything goes well with that one, there's 70 more units that they want to put up towards Yosemite. So this is a big Airbnb rental developer that we're working with on this one. So moving on to all that, we can put them on trailers. We can put the containers on our trucks. And then generally, we don't put them on slab because we can put them on slab, but generally about 70% are going on concrete pylons. And so our structural engineer will tell us, okay, here's the length, width, the height, the PSI of concrete we need to use, the whole 9 yards there. We set them down. That way we have a crawl space underneath for plumbing and stuff like that. If somebody wants to put it on a concrete slab, then we have to raise the floor of the bathroom to where we can run the P-traps and everything under there. We can get wall mount toilets to where the drains will come right out of the sidewall versus out of the bottom. There's different directions we can go. We haven't been hit up yet on compost toilets or anything like that. Most of our stuff has been pretty high end, the way that we design them and stuff. So most of them has been residential stuff. And that's the other side. Between our houseboats and the tiny homes, there's so much correlation between the two that most of our houseboats have solar, and most of them are not 100% solar, but enough solar to run AC units and stuff like that. We get clients all the time, Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, anywhere these hunting areas, especially like northern Utah as well, that want to be off grid. And so we can do a full solar system and build it to where we have a guy that that lives in St. George area in southern Utah, and he builds our solar system. I tell him, here's our appliances, here's the load values, here's what many watts we're using. Just give him all the specs. He puts a package together, and that's our solar package. So it's not like we're going out and just buying solar panels and inverters and chargers and crossing our fingers trying to figure this out. It's all put together to where if there's an issue, I have somebody to make a phone call and figure out that issue. And then in both container homes or tiny homes and houseboats, we're setting it all up to run off of 110. So normal outlets, just like you have from Home Depot. The wiring in boats need to be marine applicated wires for wiring and stuff like that. But we can run regular fridges just like you get at Home Depot, normal stoves. So all of our stoves in the tiny homes, we've been running electric because it's easier than having another line of propane and stuff out there. Houseboats, there's going to be propane for barbecues and everything anyway, so we can run gas or electric on the stoves. Microwaves, full ACs. We've done most of our units in our boats and our tiny homes have been the mini split systems now that are out to where it makes it easier. We have the one right now with 4 mini splits on one big condenser, but we order those and they come in and we just set them up and put them together. And they're super quiet, super efficient. They work really well. So as we get into transporting, how you talked about Ohio, right now we've been transporting for the West Coast. We're just now getting started with things to where things are just coming into the loop of stuff, and we're getting our semis put together, the trailers that we want to get together, the CDL licensing and everything. But eventually, what we've been finding, and we've been talking to somebody even all the way over in New Jersey, where they wanted a 10 container home. It was about 4,000 square feet. Their house had burnt down. They wanted us to design it. And at that point, we'll put the design together, we'll put the container configuration together to where we can cut out the holes, do all the framing inside and the structural work of it, and then transport it, and then they would have a general contractor finish it out there on site versus us being all the way on the East Coast. It doesn't make sense, especially warranty wise and stuff like that. So we have capacities all the way up to that, to where we just need a crane and they can drop the containers right off, and it's no different than being at the port or anywhere else with a crane. So that's pretty easy to do.
Is the price points kind of the same for the container homes compared to the boats?
No, most people, when, especially here on the West Coast, where they're using them as an Airbnb or an ST or a VVRO or STRs as well, most of them have been 1 container, 2 containers. We have a couple here in cities here in northern Utah that we're putting them as what they call an ADU unit, and that is just a like a mother-in-law suite or a guest house or anything like that. That's when they're getting to be maybe 2 to 3 containers put together. But most of our stuff for Airbnb stuff is the people want 1 container. They want it to be able to where we can do 90% of the work in the shop, load it up on a truck, bring it out, and drop it. And within a day or 2, they're ready to rent.
Okay, that's interesting. I had to measure my lot, but I'm thinking I might need to have 2 containers together. I had a house that burnt down, so I was just to plop something back in that same spot. And for price point, it would be cheaper than the boats.
So yeah, when we start with our 8x20 units, our base pricing on an 8x20 is right about $35,000.
Okay.
And then there's delivery on top of that and setup on top of that, because everybody mileage wise, we go off mileage just like most trucks. And so we could, it could be whatever. What we have found is that there's not a lot of businesses or companies that are actually there's a lot of one-offs, I'm making one in my backyard and stuff like that, and I'm going to sell it. But business wise, we've been getting a lot of calls, especially working with the container girls out of Salt Lake. They, on social media side of things, they get referrals, or they ask for referrals all the time, because they can't find anybody that wants to build these, or that has the capacity to build them, or the knowledge to build them. So that's where we've come to the point of, okay, transport's not a big deal. We'll just, here's our base price. We'll add on transport at the end or within the budget, to where we know, okay, Ohio, this is the city, plug it in and do our thing. The nice thing is with houseboats is we generally have to get special permits because of the heights and the widths, to where container homes are all going to be 8 foot wide. And they're all going to fit on a semi trailer, or we can even pull them with, a 350 dually on a gooseneck. So those things have made things a lot easier on our end versus boats. And boats get expensive to transport, not nearly as expensive as or the container homes aren't nearly as expensive as boats. Now, as we get into like an 8x40, which is the next size of container home, the base price starts right around $55,000 to $60,000. And when I say base prices, they always include the design factor. They always include a full kitchen, a full bathroom, a bedroom. In a 20-footer, you're only going to get almost like a studio. So you'd get a bedroom side of things. Sometimes we'll do a dividing wall, and then a small kitchenette, a small little living room, and then a full bathroom. And the full bathrooms are still 8 foot wide by 5-6 foot deep. And so it's no different than a size of what is in a normal house as a secondary bathroom. Most normal houses are 5x7 for a secondary with a full bath. So we've tried to keep it to where it's convenient and feels good, but you're going to give to get somewhere. You're going to have a smaller bedroom, or you're going to have a smaller bathroom if you want a bigger kitchen or whatever it is. Yeah. On the 40 footers, generally we've done for the developer in St. George in Southern Utah that we're working on the 200 homes. We've designed 3 different models for them, all 40 footers. And one of them, they all have almost 14 foot long kitchens. And so you get into a 14 foot long kitchen, that's for the most part in a 2,000 square foot house, those kitchens are usually 10 by 10. Yeah. So we're doing decently sized kitchens in these. And then some of them, we always design around a king bed. And then some of them have a bath and a half. Some of them have an office. Some of them have 2 bedrooms. We can design anything around those. And then the cool thing with containers, we can connect them. Yeah. And so we get a lot of people that kind of want a U-shape container and then have a roof that comes over it to where there's a patio in the middle. They could put a fire pit, barbecue area, sitting area, kind of just having a whole different side of things there. But the nice thing is with the steel engineering and the steel framing that we're working with, we're kind of doing a hybrid now to where we'll do 2 containers on each side, and then the back wall will be framed out. And because maybe they want a little wider than 8 feet.
Right.
So if they want 10, 12 feet, we can frame in the middle, because the cool thing is with the steel framing, we can weld that framing to our containers.
Right.
And so now we've evolved into something off the beaten path, but that's what we do. We like the custom side of things. We like to push the envelopes and push the buttons, being that we have a structural engineer set aside that does stamped plans. We can take these plans, and most of the time the cities are going to be involved. Most of the time you're going to have to pull a permit, at least here in the state of Utah. And being general contractors, that's not a problem for us, but we've found that we want to deliver a package when we go to the city, because if I walk into the city and say, I want to put a container on the house in northern Utah, people look at containers and they're hammered. They use them for storage, they use them for farming and all this stuff. And they're like, you're not putting that eyesore in a neighborhood. And so what we've done is we've come to where I have 3D drawings, I have stamped plans, I have an architectural setup, I have the site plan or the plot plans.
Right.
And present them and say, we want to put an ADU on a piece of property, and here's what the finished product is going to look like. And most of the time we get guys that are scratching their head like, holy cow, this is as nice as a regular house.
Yeah.
And then, we tell, and they may ask how we're framing it or whatever we're going to be doing. But we tell them we're modular, and we build most of it inside of our shop, and then we bring it out and drop it in place and hook it all up or weld the containers together and then finish them off. We've come up with systems with electrical and plumbing where we can come in from one unit to the next and kind of just cut them off, leave them long. And when they connect, we just use a junction box and tie them all together to where we're not having to run electrical and all the other stuff on site. We can do all of that in our shop. We build our own cabinets. And so I can build whatever we need to. And we started building our own cabinets with Houseboats, because normal cabinetry from a cabinet manufacturer they're just heavy. And they're just too heavy for our boats. And so we've been into building our own cabinet boxes with 1/2-inch plywood boxes. Being that my background is natural stone, we're doing quartz and granite on countertops all the time in our boats. And so we've been able to offset the weights and stuff like that, because I can do lighter cabinets that will still stand or withstand the weight of a countertop, being 1.25-inch countertop or whatever. We just started moving into the porcelain side of things. Porcelain countertops are somewhat new, but we can get them in 1/2-inch thickness, and the weight factor is huge. They're just now coming out with more and more colors, just like a quartz, to where pricing is starting to drop down as China's going to jump into it, I'm sure, here pretty soon. Besides the big manufacturers that are out there, prices will come down like with quartz as well. But it's given us an avenue to where I can pay attention and put weight somewhere else in the boat versus having all the weight on one side into a kitchen.
My last question that I wrote down here is insurance for these container homes. Is that an issue? Do insurance companies, are they cool with these container homes?
We've found insurance hasn't been an issue with what we've done, because we're building it just as an ADU. So we haven't had those issues because we followed all the rules and the codes to get there. We just got certified with RVIA, which is the RV Association, where they go through and they send an inspector out and they inspect as we go along and everything. So everything's done correctly there. And that's going to be helping a lot with the insurance side of things. Being that we've built a lot of local stuff here within a half hour of our facility, we've done a majority of on-site builds instead. And so having inspectors come out, it has not been an issue, because it's just like a normal house build. It's no big deal, or a room addition or anything else from there. Interestingly enough, from what I've been told, we should be seeing something from Freddie Mac here pretty soon for ADU units, which for now financing is going to be much easier to get, because banks and credit unions right now, it's kind of tough to get financed on those things there. So ADU units, or I guess you'd say container homes in general, is still pretty new. It's still pretty new to Utah. People are getting it, but if they're done wrong in the beginning and they're not structurally done and everything else, I can see them just putting the hammer down and saying no more.
Yeah.
If we have businesses like ours and others that are certified and that are getting the ducks in the row and paying attention and getting the permitting and doing it correctly, it's going to go places, just because of the uniqueness that can be done to them. And people want, it's not for everybody, and we get that a lot. An 8 foot wide, how you can do anything with that? It just feels too tight. We get that, but it's not for everybody, and that's why we said, okay, let's do a tiny home division as well, because if we can't fit you in an 8x20 or an 8x40 and you just feel too tight and you want a loft, say you want a loft with normal trusses and stuff, to where we can totally build that. And realistically, price point per square foot isn't that different from a tiny home to a container home when everything's said and done. When you cut a container home up and have to weld in all the structure, and you're still framing the interior of that container home. You're still doing spray foam or closed cell spray foam insulation. There's a lot that you need to do. And a tiny home, it's going to be about the same. So we've been finding anywhere between the $200 to $300 a square foot in Utah anyway, or West Coast. When you get into California, that changes, but pretty much Arizona and Utah, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, it's all been within that base price around $200 a square foot, upper end, $275 to $300 a square foot. Yep. And when we talk about upgrades, we're talking, there's not a ton to upgrade. We can put heating systems in floors, especially for the cold side of things here. With the other thing that we pay attention to is snow load. You've got Tahoe right now that's gotten beat with snow. We've gotten our amount here. Colorado's gotten a great amount. And so with the structural side of things and our engineering side, we can engineer roofs to be correct. Instead of just having a flat roof, we'll have one with a pitch on it so it can hold snow loads. And then you have granite countertops, quartz countertops, upgraded cabinets that we can do with soft close hinges, dovetail drawers, the whole 9 yards, tile bathrooms and showers, anything that they want on that, because I don't have a limit of weight. Right. And so generally we're finding that when we're all said and done, we're running right about 15 to 20,000 pounds with everything inside. And then they'll have a regular, I can stub them out with 30 amp or 50 amp plugs, just like an RV. Yep. Or we can put an electrical box with 100 amp service and just tie right into that when they come in. Now, the thing is, on container homes or tiny homes, we have our clients have the water, sewer, and power already in place. We have it all out on the site plan, so everything ties in right. But all that needs to be done along with the foundation work. But the cool thing is, while they're doing that, we can be building in our shop the units to where, as it comes together, we're done over here, we're done over here, we bring it out within a week's time, it's ready to go, and you can be renting it out or living in it. That's the bigger factor of things there. We found that we can build a 20-foot unit within about 4 to 6 weeks in our shop, and a 40-foot unit we're building within about 8 to 10 weeks, depending how busy we are. We're getting in the busy season right now, which Airbnb, VRBO, and STRs, wintertime is one of those things to where we're building because everybody wants it ready to go for April, May, and through those summer months for the West Coast. Yeah. And so the busy seasons right now, and through summer. Houseboats, the busy season's off season, which is our wintertime. And so it kind of works really well between the both of them for what we have going on both ends of that for winter and summer. So it's not a seasonal option.
Awesome. I love this. Well, I'm sold. I'm gonna probably send you some information to see if you can fit something to fit on my foundation. But if people wanted to, you didn't ever mention, I don't think, your company name. How do they find you? How do they track you down if they're interested to learn more about this? So
with what we've got versus 20 years ago with advertising, social media has kicked in, and I ran my last 4 or 5 businesses strictly off social media. Mainly Facebook for the demographic side of things, because houseboat side is generally at 40 to 65-year-old. We're more into Instagram with my container and tiny home business, because the younger families or younger kids are more involved in that. Plus, it's more affordable. With the interest rates and everything right now, it's just out the roof. So the other thing is I do have connections for in-house financing on the container homes.
Okay.
So I have a private lender that we work with on that end, and we're working with getting financing put together. So when clients, we can send them to different places. We're not set up with that just yet, but it's coming.
Okay.
So the houseboat side of things, you can find us on Facebook, which is Exclusive Yacht Houses / Last Chance Houseboats. And that's in Page, Arizona. And then the container and tiny home business is out of northern Utah, and that's Las Casitas. So LAS.
Yep.
And then Casita, CASITAS.
Perfect.
And we're out of that's out of Kaysville, Utah. And then I do all my own sales and all my own, even on both ends of it, I do everything myself. So people can reach out to me directly as well. If they want to email me, they can email me to my personal email, which is troya614@gmail.com. And then I've got a cell number of 385-515-3947.
Awesome. Well, I will be reaching out because I have a spot, like I mentioned, that I'm trying to do. And I'm sure that you're going to have a lot of people that are interested in this. I think this is a very affordable product, and it solves a solution. And it's cool and it's trendy as well.
Well, and we've got, so on the northern side of the states where the hunting is and stuff like that, we're actually designing a refrigerated semi-trailer for a guy that does, his business is taking people out in his property and going hunting, and taking groups out, like corporate groups and different things like that. He was looking at a motor home that was going to cost about $300,000 to be able to fit people comfortably, like 6 to 8 guys.
Yeah.
And move it around on his property to different locations for hunting. And can come to find out, once you're $300,000 and you scratch it with a tree or whatever, kiss it goodbye.
Yeah.
And not only that, RVs just aren't big enough to have the size of beds and everything. So what we've come up with is a 53-foot semi trailer that's refrigerated. So it's insulated already. It's up off the ground enough to where I can put holding tanks all down the bottom. We can design it because it's a container. It's simple. So I can design it however he wants to design it, windows, the whole 9 yards, put full on 100% off-grid solar on top.
Cool.
And with all the holding tanks, and we're talking 300-gallon holding tanks. You got 6 or 8 guys out there that, for a week, you need some holding tanks. So put all that in, everything refrigerated, everything being your normal residential appliances inside, bedrooms, whatever size he wants. And he's in, I think, he's just under 200 with all the solar, because everything's 100% solar. But and he can pull it around with his semi truck wherever he wants. If it hits a tree, he doesn't care, because it's a container on the outside. You repaint it after 2 or 3 years and paint it again. So there's some really cool different directions of things that we're putting together, and ideas, and being in the houseboat industry and converting over to this as well. It's kind of just meshing both of them to where it works really well. And it gives somebody an idea to where it's very out of the box. And we're not the type that says no. We'll figure it out and work around budgets and work around whatever you want to design, and you can design it and we'll build it. So it works out pretty cool.
I love it. That's a great attitude to have too. It's a problem solving. Troy, I appreciate this. This was great. Thank you for coming on this show.
Of course.
I really appreciate this. It was great.
Well, maybe we'll hit up again as we get a little busier, and we can throw some designs out and some different things down the road.
I love it. Let's do it.
All right. Thanks for your time.
Thanks again.